Hello, everybody. Welcome into GSMC's Down by Contact Sports Podcast. I am your host, Jeremy Lapidus. Today is Wednesday, February 26th. We have a lot to get into. We're going to start off going over the third annual NFLPA report card, grading every single team based on a whole bunch of different categories, as well as going over what Luka and the Lakers did last night. Luka getting his revenge on the Dallas Mavericks. Then the NBA power ranking before finishing up our series, going over today with the NFL offseason preview, the Los Angeles Rams and their bevy of potential moves and trades, and then turning our attention in the MLB to the NL Central, starting off with the Milwaukee Brewers. But before we get into any of that, remember, if you would like to be an even bigger part of the show than you already are, all you need to do is go to gsmcpodcast.net. Or if you're on YouTube, you can use that super chat feature. If you do either of those two things, a message should pop up on the bottom of the screen for you, me, and everybody else around the world to see. If you do have a burning question about sports, go ahead and throw that in the comments. Throw it in the chat. I will get to it as soon as I possibly can. I appreciate everybody so much for sticking around, talking some sports with me here on a beautiful Wednesday, February 26th. But like I was saying, we are going to get into our first segment here, that having to do with the NFLPA report cards. The NFLPA report cards came out, the third annual ones. They ranked these teams 32-1 based on a whole bunch of different criteria. Treatment of families, the food and dining area, the nutritionist and dining and dietitian, the locker room, the training staff. You have the weight staff, the strength coaches, team travel, lastly, the head coach and the ownership. And they also weighted these on a bunch of different levels, right? The two most important pieces to this, based on the responses, 15% of the team's overall grade on a normal American grading system, A+ to F-, was with the club owner. Then 10% went with the head coach. So 25% of the grade is based on the head coach and the owner. And that's very important when we look at some of the teams at the bottom of the list, why they might have struggled. Team travel, strength coaches, weight room, training staff, training room, locker room, and the food/cafeteria all sit at 9%, while treatment of families and the nutritionist/dietitian are weighted at just 6%. But again, if you don't have a good club owner, it's going to reflect pretty poorly on your team. And there were a couple teams that had huge jumps this season. We'll start off with one of the more obvious jumps based on that criteria, the Washington Commanders. They were three teams that were up more than 20 spots in this year's poll. The Washington Commanders were the first one. They moved up 21 spots. They were dead last season. Now they pull in at 11. Up 21 spots. The Washington Commanders, of course, most obviously had an owner change. Dan Quinn was rated as one of 6 coaches with an A+ rating, as well as the owner, not being Dan Snyder, playing a huge role in the Washington Commanders turning their franchise around. Jaden Daniels comes in, they start winning games, and everything just seems to change. There's more money going into this organization. It's no longer a dumpster fire with the worst owner in all of professional sports. But the Commanders weren't the only one to go up over 20 spots. As we get into the top 5, the Los Angeles Chargers made a big jump, and they didn't change owners, but they did change head coaches. Jim Harbaugh comes into this program and changes it pretty significantly. Now, of course, it's not just him on its own. They were ranked number 30 last season. They're up 25 spots, the biggest jump in all of the NFL. They're up all the way into the top 5 are the Los Angeles Chargers. And again, we go back to that ranking scale. 10% of it is with head coach. And we can say a lot of the same things about the Atlanta Falcons. They move all the way up to number 3. They were ranked number 25 last season. They move up 22 spots in this year's NFLPA poll. The Atlanta Falcons also got a new head coach, which shows how a lot of people thought of Arthur Smith, Brandon Staley, when they were the head coach back then, but it also shows that these polls work, right? You had a bunch of teams that moved up, and overall, the grades were a lot better. Even the teams at the bottom, they were better than they were last season. The Arizona Cardinals, while they did drop 5 spots to the bottom of the league, they still were better in a lot of the key areas. There were some reports last season of them having rats in the cafeteria. That was fixed this season. And I know that's kind of a low bar, but it shows that even in the lowest ranking organizations, the Patriots, the Cardinals, the Browns, the Jets, the Steelers, there are changes being made, positive changes based on the ownership, based on the results of these NFLPA report cards, and I really love that they're coming out and doing this. We went over the good, right? The teams that went up 20 plus points. But there wasn't all good in this. Aside from the Minnesota Vikings and the Miami Dolphins once again being the top two, this was a list fraught with changes. From number 3 all the way down to number 32, only the Pittsburgh Steelers and the top 2 teams were in the same position as they were last year. The Dolphins and the Vikings always seem to be fighting for this. The Dolphins had first place in 7 different categories. Their worst category was 6th place, and that was with their head coach, who still got an A+ in Mike McDaniel. But still, this is one of those things that you look at these two organizations really being great for their players. Surprisingly, the Dolphins owner got the best rating out of anybody. They're also the only team, the Dolphins, to get all A's on their report card. So congratulations, honor roll student over there. The Minnesota Vikings got 1 B+. They're there at second, but everything they do continues to be amazing as we see. But it's not all good. There's plenty of organizations that really dropped the ball this year. There were 4 organizations that fell double-digit spots. Starting at number 18 on the list here, the Jacksonville Jaguars. They fall 13 spots this year. This is a Jacksonville Jaguars team that, again, we can talk about ownership. We can talk about head coaching. They got their head coach fired. That might have something to do with it here. There's a whole bunch of things that went wrong in Jacksonville. The Giants fall 12 spots to number 20. They were in the top 10 last year. I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that they looked really bad on Hard Knocks in the offseason, right? I think the players saw that, and they thought this was a historically well-run organization. It usually is. But now we look at where the Giants sit, down near the bottom of the league, falling 12 spots. It's not a good look. And 2 more teams fell a whole bunch. The Philadelphia Eagles are a really interesting one to me because they just won a Super Bowl, and they've fallen 18 spots. They're actually the biggest droppers in all of the NFL this year. They were all the way up in the top 10 at number 5 last season, and now at number 4 last season, and now they're all the way down to 22. This is a Philadelphia Eagles team that just didn't keep the standard up, and I think that'll change, especially since winning a Super Bowl, the players will be a little more happy, but it's a little shocking to see some of these really good teams at the bottom. The Kansas City Chiefs at 26, they were ranked at 31 last season. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers continue to be near the bottom of the league. The Pittsburgh Steelers, again, bottom of the league. But one more team also fell. 12 spots, the Buffalo Bills drop. The Buffalo Bills have an MVP quarterback. They have a coach that continues to win football games. They just think that the facilities aren't the greatest, especially with the weather. That's the news coming out of Buffalo. Of course, that's one of the reasons why the Minnesota Vikings are so high up. The weather isn't great over there in Minneapolis, but they got that indoor stuff. Buffalo does not have the indoor stuff that Minnesota has, and I think they're struggling because of that in this poll. Maybe we see that get fixed in the future, but I think we get to see what the players think of all this, and I really do love that they do this report card every single year. I really do love that the players get a say anonymously so they can say everything that they want to about their team without risk of attacking the owner and getting in trouble for it. I really love that the NFLPA does this, and there's lots of really interesting tidbits that come out every single year when this report card comes out. So keep your eye on this because hopefully some of the teams that we mentioned, like the Eagles, the Bills, the Giants, the Jags, that fell a whole lot, or the teams at the bottom, like the Cardinals, the Patriots, the Browns, the Jets, they can get their ranking up. They can see what the players want, help them sign their free agent if you're near the top. These teams like the Dolphins and the Vikings and the Falcons, they're going to be a lot more intriguing, a lot better of destinations for these potential free agents if they're on the fence about it because these polls say, hey, this is a good spot to be. And that's exactly what you want to hear when you're talking about some of these teams that need to sign the free agents. The Raiders also in the top 5, which is really cool to see. With Tom Brady there, maybe they'll be able to grab some more free agents as well. But the Raiders didn't even move up that high. But let me know what you think. Who were you most surprised by? I know I personally was the most surprised that the Eagles fell 18 spots in this one, but I'd love to hear your thoughts. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we turn our attention over to our talk about Luka and the Lakers. The Lakers took care of business against the Mavericks last night at home in LA. We're talking about what happened over there, what that means for the future of the Lakers and the Mavs, and what that means for a future potential rivalry in the NBA. We'll be right back here on GSMC's Down by Contact Sports Podcast.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign.
I wanna be the greatest. Everybody on the fake shit. I look around and feel like everybody is the fakest. I make this every day and I'm impatient, hoping one day I blow up from the basement. Statement, the top is so vacant. I don't hear shit that I think is amazing. Waiting for my day when I'm playing sold out shows for 1,000 faces. Hey, give me that crown, get in my way and to be put down. It ain't your place, all this my town. If I want that shit, then I'll get it right now. I'm losing it, the noose it fits. I'm losing shit, a stupid myth. You choose to live or choose to dip. You choose to fight or lose your grip and lose a gift.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind?
Welcome back to GSMC's Down by Contact Sports Podcast. I am your host, Jeremy Lapidus. Today is Wednesday, February 26th. If you were just tuning in, we just finished going over the NFLPA's report card, the third annual one that comes out every single offseason. In this segment, we turn our attention over to a revenge game over in the NBA. Luka Doncic and the Lakers took care of business against the Dallas Mavericks last night. We're going to talk about that game in full, what it means for Luka right now, and what it means for the Lakers Mavs in the future. But before we do, remember, if you would like to be an even bigger part of the show than you already are, all you need to do is go to gsmcpodcast.net. Or if you're on YouTube, you can use that super chat feature. If you do either of those two things, a message should pop up on the bottom of the screen for you, me, and everybody else around the world to see. If you do have a burning question about sports, anything at all that you would like to ask, go ahead and throw that in the comments. Throw it in the chat. I will get to it as soon as I possibly can. I appreciate everybody so much for sticking around, talking some sports with me here on a beautiful Wednesday, February 26th. But like I was saying, we're going to get into the Luka Doncic versus the Mavericks. Luka gets his revenge. He goes out there and drops his first triple-double as a Laker against his former team. Now, a lot of people were expecting a lot out of Luka Doncic, and he didn't quite deliver on a record-setting game. But 19, 15, and 12 is nothing to scoff at all. We also got to see more and more of him being comfortable in this Lakers team. He was very excited in this game. He went out there. He wanted to prove something, hit a tough three, stared down the Mavs bench. There's clearly and obviously some dislike between Luka Doncic and this Mavericks team, especially the way that they sent him out. One of the wildest trades in NBA history. He's going to be on that team for a long time. I don't know what the future holds for Nico Harrison and the Dallas Mavericks, but if he's there for a long time, it's going to make it very interesting. We also got to see what this team might look like as they've started to get more comfortable with Luka Doncic and LeBron. LeBron, who led the team in scoring, put up 27 points in a double-double with 12 rebounds as well. what this team might look like as we get into playoff time, right? This is clearly a team with weaknesses. There's a very obvious and glaring weakness in the fact that Jackson Hayes is your starting center. You go out and you bring in Alex Len, but he's still not getting minutes. He's not really super comfortable in this offense yet, and he's someone that even just as a body, as a defensive body, someone that can just put his arms up and make life difficult for guys trying to drive on the inside, is not going to be enough when it comes to playoff time for the Los Angeles Lakers, right? The Lakers are up there in the West simply because of this duo or trio, if you want to add Austin Reeves in there. They've got the shooting. They've got Reeves. They've got Dalton Knecht coming off the bench. They've got more people that can they've got more people, and that still includes Luka Doncic with his shooting. The key for surrounding LeBron has always been get him shooters, right? You have that with the Lakers. Some solid bench pieces. And you have Luka Doncic, who's arguably the best pure scorer in the NBA right now. Now, that doesn't mean he's the best player in the world. I still think that goes to Jokic. But when you have Luka, who's a top 2 player in the world, probably sitting at number 2 in my opinion, and LeBron James, who's the best player to ever play basketball, you have a deadly duo, especially when LeBron continues to play at the level that he's playing at. So now we take a little bit of a step back. Where do the Lakers rank in the West after this game, after this stretch where we've gotten to see these two play together and get comfortable together and continue to work on their chemistry? There's a couple teams that you can make the argument they're better or worse than, and we'll start at the bottom of that list. The Rockets. For a long time at the beginning of the season, this young Rockets team was turning into one of the best teams in the West. They had that 2 seed locked up for a while behind the Oklahoma City Thunder. They've started to fall a little bit. This is still a great Rockets team, but they're a year or two away from truly contending in my mind, and I think when you look at it, despite how good that defense is for the Rockets, they don't have the outside three-point shooting or the offensive consistency to really show up as one of the top teams in the West. I think they're just outside of that bubble at number 5. The Memphis Grizzlies are a really interesting one. I love this Grizzlies team. I think this is a Grizzlies team that has all of the components to be a NBA championship level team. You obviously have the superstar in Ja Morant, but a little bit on under the radar, although not super under the radar. You have JJJ, who's going to win another Defensive Player of the Year award after Wemby went down. He's playing arguably with MVP-like numbers. This is a team that is complete on offense and defense, and this is a scary Grizzlies team. Playing in a small market like Memphis, they don't get their time to shine, but come playoff time, if people aren't ready for them, they're going to surprise and could go a really long way. And I think it's a really good argument between the Grizzlies and the Lakers. Right now, I think I'm going to push it towards the Lakers just a little bit more because the star power is just a little bit brighter on the Lakers side right now. But this is absolutely a coin flip, a toss-up. If they played in a series, I think that goes a good 7 games. The other team that I think would be a toss-up is the Denver Nuggets. The Denver Nuggets I think, slightly ahead of the Lakers right now because Jokic is just the best player in the world, and it really isn't that close, right? You have Jokic who, against anybody, especially against a team that doesn't have a center or a reliable center, is going to eat you up. Jokic could drop 40 every single time these two teams play, and we saw them play a little while ago, earlier this week, and the Lakers were able to come out with a win, but JJ Redick and that coaching staff were coaching for days. They were game planning for days to figure out how to beat this team, and it was still a really close game. At the end of the day, the Nuggets, I still think, are a little bit better than the Lakers, at least in a series. I take the Nuggets over them. And the last one are the Thunder. This is a Thunder team that I think is just ridiculously talented. You obviously have MVP level Shea numbers going on, one of the most impressive single season efforts when it comes to scoring as a guard, with his ability to cut to the inside so effortlessly. It feels like he just slips and slides past everybody and they can't get a hand on him. He is incredible to watch on the basketball court, but it's not just him. The defense is crazy, and they've struggled with some injuries. Chet And Chet and Hartenstein continue to be dealing with injuries this year, and they're going to be needed in the playoffs because as good on the defensive end as this team is, with Lou Dort and a bunch of those guys, and Jalen Williams being some of the best perimeter defenders in the NBA, when it comes to the inside, if they don't have their big guy down low, if they don't have the people they rely on to shut down a Jokic, it's going to be tough. I still think the Thunder are the best team in the West, but you can absolutely make an argument that the Lakers could be placed ahead of them. At the end of the day, I think I put them either at 3 or 4, but I'm going to put them at 3 right ahead of the Grizzlies, but just barely, because I love that Luka LeBron combo. But I'd love to hear your thoughts. Where do you think the Lakers sit in the Western Conference? Do you think they're the third best team, the second best team, all the way down at 5? I'd love to hear your thoughts. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, the NBA Power Rankings coming up for you right around the corner. We'll be right back here on GSMC's Down by Contact Sports Podcast.
Looking for your daily fix of sports talk without having to pay for it? GSMC Sports Network is available on YouTube. Just search GSMC Sports Network. Get your fix of daily sports talk shows on YouTube, absolutely free. NFL, college football, NBA, MLB, MMA, UFC, fantasy football, and so much more. GSMC Sports Network has shows running all day long, with new sports shows starting every 2 hours. Just like on your favorite cable sports channel, except GSMC Sports Network is absolutely free. Just search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube to catch one of your new favorite shows, like the GSMC College Football Podcast, Chip Shot Football Podcast, Hoops and Heels Women's Sports Podcast, GSMC Basketball Podcast, and so many more. Check it out for yourself. GSMC Sports Network, now available on YouTube absolutely free. Search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube right now. Looking for your daily fix of sports talk without having to pay for it? GSMC Sports Network is available on YouTube. Just search GSMC Sports Network. Get your fix of daily sports talk shows on YouTube, absolutely free. NFL, college football, NBA, MLB, MMA, UFC, fantasy football, and so much more. GSMC Sports Network has shows running all day long, with new sports shows starting every 2 hours. Just like on your favorite cable sports channel, except GSMC Sports Network is absolutely free. Just search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube to catch one of your new favorite shows, like the GSMC College Football Podcast, Chip Shot Football Podcast, Hoops and Heels Women's Sports Podcast, GSMC Basketball Podcast, and so many more. Check it out for yourself. GSMC Sports Network, now available on YouTube absolutely free. Search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube right now.
Welcome back to GSMC's Down by Contact Sports Podcast. I am your host, Jeremy Lapidus. Today is Wednesday, February 26th. If you are just tuning in, we just finished going over the Lakers getting a massive win in a revenge game over the Dallas Mavericks, 107-99 last night. In this segment, we turn our attention to the rest of the NBA. The NBA Power Rankings coming up for you in just a second, but before we do, remember, if you would like to be an even bigger part of the show than you already are, all you need to do is go to gsmcpodcast.net. Or if you're on YouTube, you can use that super chat feature. If you do either of those two things, a message should pop up on the bottom of the screen for you, me, and everybody else around the world to see. If you do have a burning question about sports, anything at all that you would like to ask, go ahead and throw that in the comments. Throw it in the chat. I will get to it as soon as I possibly can. I appreciate everybody so much for sticking around, talking some sports with me here on a beautiful Wednesday, February 26th. But like I was saying, we are going to get into our NBA Power Rankings. We're going to kick off right where we left off. At number 30, the Washington Wizards. The Wizards continue to be the worst team in the NBA, and it really isn't that close. They went and got a couple talented guys in Marcus Smart and Chris Middleton, but really, it's not going to do much for them at the end of the day. They have just 10 wins on the year. That's at least four more losses than anybody else in the NBA at this point, and we're looking at a team that is just hoping and praying they can grab a guy like Cooper Flag with the first overall pick in next year's draft. At 29, we have the New Orleans Pelicans. Talk about a team that's dealt with the worst injury luck. It's the same thing every time we talk about this team. This is a team that I think could be really good. They really could be. They have the potential. They've got the players. But this is a team that just does not have the injury luck this year to do anything when it comes to winning basketball right now. At 28, we've got the Jazz, a young team, not anywhere close. They're probably around the same tier as the Wizards right now, another young team that just isn't quite ready yet. You get a couple top-tier guys in the building, the Utah Jazz could potentially be something in the next couple years, but they're not looking at that right now. They've got a long rebuild ahead of them. At 27, we've got the Hornets, another team that's been hit with injuries. They had a little bit of a promising start this year, a near all-star appearance for LaMelo Ball, right? This is a Charlotte Hornets team that has potential with its players, but it just feels like they're that one really big piece away from doing anything huge when it comes to the Eastern Conference. At number 26, it's the 76ers. We talked a lot about them this week, especially around Joel Embiid. It sounds like he is not coming back for the rest of the season, and that sucks for this Philadelphia 76ers. But this is a Sixers team that has more problems than Joel Embiid. This might be a very serious surgery. Not sure when he comes back. He might have to miss a large chunk of next season. He didn't even play in 20 games this year. It's tough. You're paying him a lot of money. Injuries hit every single big player on this team, and everything just fell apart this year for the Philadelphia 76ers. At 25, we've got the Raptors. The addition of Brandon Ingram hasn't done too much for them, but he's a nice little piece that if they can continue to build around the success they had last NBA season, I know this year hasn't been very good, they could be on the fringe of an NBA play-in team next year, maybe even a playoff team if they make the right moves in the offseason. At 24, we have the Nets, a team that's trying to lose but just has too many solid pieces right now to really be the worst in the league. They've been really good right now. When they get hot shooting, they're really hard to beat. Now, the Wizards have taken care of them twice in this quick little stretch, but outside of the Wizards, not a lot of teams have been able to beat the Nets right now. They're trying not to lose. Their players are. They traded everybody away. They're still going to have a top pick, but they're kind of shooting themselves in the foot right now with a couple clutch plays over the Sixers and a couple other teams that they've managed to beat recently. At 23, we've got the Bulls. Matthias Buzelis has really shown up as a pretty solid piece for them this year, but they're still a team that I think should be preparing for the future, right? They've kind of kicked the can down the road of a pseudo-rebuild for a very long time, but now they finally get to it. They're finally able to move off of Zach LaVine this trade deadline, and now we can see a potential future for this team as they start to really embrace that rebuild. At 21, the Portland Trail Blazers. The Portland Trail Blazers have been a pretty good surprise this season, right? This is a Trail Blazers team that isn't anything special, but 25 wins right now, a young roster that's continuing to get better. Denny Avdia has really shown up after leaving the Wizards, showing up with the Trail Blazers. Scoot Henderson has developed pretty nicely this season. This is a team that has a lot of good pieces and still isn't dead in the West yet. If they can somehow find a way to sneak their way into a play-in spot, that would be wild, and it's not even out of the picture right now. They went on a pretty big win streak right before the All-Star break. If they can do that again, maybe they can find their way in this season, which would be a huge surprise. At 22, we had that backwards. Don't know how that happened, but either way, 22, it's the San Antonio Spurs. The Spurs, they lose the star of their organization, right? They lose Victor Wembanyama. Victor Wembanyama is out for the year. Greg Popovich not coming back this season. You have you have a really solid team that can continue to develop. Castle, young guy, De'Aaron Fox coming in, point guard of the future. Chris Paul being that solid veteran leadership. This team took a big step forward this season, but with injuries coming up against this team, it just hurts them a whole bunch. At number 20, we've got the Atlanta Hawks. The Atlanta Hawks come in this season, and I mean, this has just been not great, right? They end up being sellers at the deadline, despite still having Trae Young on the roster. He's someone that they'd like to be able to build around, but every time the effort has come in to build around Trae Young, it just has not worked. And the Atlanta Hawks kind of slipping into that mediocre area in the NBA, where they kind of are stuck in NBA purgatory for a very long time. And number 19, the Phoenix Suns. Everything that kind of could have gone wrong with this trio has gone wrong. And it wasn't just the fact that on the court they're not really able to play together the way that you want a big three to be able to, but even when they tried to break it up, Bradley Beal potentially on the trade block this season, Kevin Durant potentially on the trade block this season to save some money, they weren't even able to break that up. And that really stings for a team that is so far over the cap, and they're still not going to be able to make any kind of noise in the playoffs this year. At 18, we have the Heat, a team that was kind of forced into a bad spot with Jimmy Butler this season. Tyler Hero has stepped up and played pretty good basketball this year. He's someone that if he can continue to play like this, they can maybe find their way out of this. Bam Adebayo hopefully steps up when they need him to. But this is a Heat team that's not really going to be too much of a threat, I think, when it comes to the postseason. They might find a way to win a play-in game, play-in series, potentially take a game or two from whoever they play at the top of the East, but I don't see them going too far. At 17, we have the Magic. When healthy, this Magic team is great. They still struggle with shooting the three, and that is their big weakness, but their defense, pretty good. And again, when healthy, this is a team that I think could be very dangerous. They're just not healthy right now, and they haven't really been healthy all season. At 16, we have the Kings. I like the pairing of DeMar DeRozan and Zach LaVine, as well as pairing him up with Domantas Sabonis down low. It's not a super flashy big three, but this is a team that has a lot of solid players. I still think this is a team that, can maybe make a little bit of noise in the playoffs. They're not out of it yet, but in the West, a tough Western Conference, they're not getting anything done. Going back to the Spurs, Andre says he was excited for the playoffs going from Wemby, but going from Wemby to Biyombo just hurts. You're right, it does. And that sucks with the Spurs, but they'll be back and better than ever next season because the Spurs have a great coach potentially if Popovich does come back, and Wemby, who you can already see the potential for him to be the best player in the world, even in the next couple of seasons, which is very exciting. He's just a fun guy to watch, and you hope that the blood clot doesn't sideline him for too far into his career. At number 15, we have the Dallas Mavericks. The Dallas Mavericks trade of Luka has been a disaster, right? You don't even have the piece that put you into quote-unquote win now mode, right, with Anthony Davis, but Max Christie has been a pretty solid throw-in guy. He's been someone that's really stepped up when given minutes now that he's playing for Dallas. It just sucks. There's not really a positive spin right now. They made the finals last year, and now this team is just completely out of whack and directionless. At 14, we have the Clippers. This is a Clippers team that has been a big, pleasant surprise for me. I expected them to be near the bottom of the league this season, but they've completely shocked me. The Los Angeles Clippers continue to dominate, or I shouldn't say dominate, but play pretty good basketball. They're setting themselves up to make it potentially to the second round if they get the right matchup. But again, in a tight Western Conference, it's not going to be easy. The Pistons at 13. You see that up there. They've won 7 straight games. The Detroit Pistons have won 32 games this season. They're playing Boston right now. And before we started this segment, halfway through the third quarter, they were up by 7 points on the Boston Celtics. This is a team that is hot right now, and it will potentially make a run in the Eastern Conference, especially a weak Eastern Conference. The way that they're playing right now, they can beat just about anybody, and they're showing that tonight. At number 12, we have the Warriors. They've rattled off a couple wins since Jimmy Butler came over. I love that pairing. We talked about it when that trade happened, but the pairing of Steph Curry, who's an excellent off-ball and on-ball guy, he just constantly gets so much attention that you have to double him at all times, and you leave Jimmy Butler open one-on-one, he's going to cook you if you give him that space because he's just a very special player in the NBA. It might not be enough in a good Western Conference, but this should absolutely push them above that play-in line at a minimum. At number 11, the Timberwolves. They had a huge win, a huge comeback win last time out against the Oklahoma City Thunder. Anthony Edwards is playing like one of the best players on the planet right now. He's amazing, so much fun to watch. This is a Timberwolves team that feels like it's not really ready to win a championship this year, but if they keep building the way that they're building this team, maybe find a way to get a little bit cheaper, get some young guys, this is a team maybe with a secondary scorer so Anthony Edwards doesn't have to drop 40 every night for them to win. This is a Minnesota Timberwolves team that could do some damage. At 10, we've got the Bucks. We've seen a huge turnaround from the beginning of the season, right? But Giannis and Dame continue to be great. We saw them win a couple games after the All-Star break. Kyle Kuzma's entered the lineup. He hasn't been a game changer for them, but he hasn't been a negative like he kind of was for the Wizards this season. Change of scenery does him well. I don't know if it's enough for the Bucks to really make a title run, but I think this is a Bucks team that did improve a little bit. At 9, we've got the Pacers. Getting into the top 10, this is just an underwhelming team, right? There's not really a guy that you look at as a superstar. Tyrese Halliburton, maybe. Pascal Siakam, who makes the playoffs, right? Evan Turner, or Miles Turner, excuse me, who continues to be a rock over there in that organization. Benedict Mathurin, who's really shown up off the bench as a pretty great scorer. But this is a team that just plays really good basketball, really good team basketball. And if they continue to play this way, maybe they can make a run like last season. At 8, we have got the Rockets. They've kind of slid a little bit since the beginning of the year. They were sitting at number 2 in the West early on this season, for most of the season, actually. But we're starting to see the age and lack of three-point shooting catch up to them a little bit. That defense is still really good, and that's what's keeping them alive. They should be a dangerous team in the playoffs, but I think it was smart of them not to go all in at the deadline, because you want to see what this team turns into, what their big weaknesses are, and then you can start to address it with a big-time move. At number 7, we have the New York Knicks. This is a team that has all the star power you want. The Cat trade has done wonders for them, but they don't have a center. The defense is lacking. As good as that offense is, it's hard to rely on your starters to play 40 to 48 minutes a game. It's just a lot. You're starting to see injuries catch up to them, and that's the issue when you have a Tom Thibodeau coach team. It's just, you get the good with the bad. Jalen Brunson, amazing. Cat, amazing. Josh Hart should come back soon. This is a Knicks team that is still really good, but the defense is going to hurt them when they get to the big moments in the playoffs. The Grizzlies at 6. We talked a lot about this Grizzlies team in the last segment. I love this Grizzlies team. This is a team that I think starts off that list of contenders in the NBA. They've got the defense, they've got the superstar, they've got the offense, they've got the guys that are playing at MVP levels, they've got the depth. The rookies have really shown up for them this season, and this is a Grizzlies team that I think is going under the radar a little bit too much. At 5, though, we've got the Lakers. Luka's arrival for this team has been nothing short of a godsend, right? It feels like it feels like this feels like this was just kind of rigged, right? If there ever was an NBA is rigged moment, it was that one, right? Luka getting traded and at midnight East Coast time to the Los Angeles Lakers out of nowhere. It's been a match made in heaven with him and LeBron, and this is a very, very dangerous team as we get to playoff time. At 4, we've got the Nuggets. They went on a big run before losing to the Lakers last time they played, but this is a Nuggets team that, as long as they have Jokic, as long as they continue playing the way that they have been recently, can be a dominant force in the West and potentially even win an NBA title. Heading back east, the Boston Celtics are at 3. This is just a team with no weaknesses. We talk about a three-point shooting barrage. It's the Boston Celtics. You have the guys to do it offensively. Defensively, it's a very, very tough team to stop, and the Boston Celtics continue to be one of the best teams in basketball. And number 2, the Cleveland Cavaliers. I know they now have the best record in basketball after the Thunder dropped one, but I still think overall the Thunder are a better team. I love this Cavs team. Donovan Mitchell continues to be one of my favorite players to watch. Darius Garland, Evan Mobley, that trio right there, as well as throwing in Jarrett Allen, is a very scary starting lineup. And they've done an amazing job this year under Kenny Atkinson in his first year coaching, but I don't think they're quite the best team in basketball. That honor is saved for the Oklahoma City Thunder. And like I said, I know that they gave up that big lead to the Timberwolves last time they played, but this is still a team that, dealing with all the injuries they've dealt with, has been a powerhouse in every sense of the word. If they can get healthy for the playoffs, and that is a big if at this point because it doesn't seem like they're ever going to be allowed to be healthy. They're the best team in basketball, and I still don't think it really is that close. But let me know what you think. Top 10, we've got the Bucks, the Pacers, the Rockets, the Knicks, the Grizzlies, Lakers, Nuggets, Celtics, Cavs, and the Thunder. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this list. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we turn our attention over to the dream offseason for the Los Angeles Rams. What does the perfect offseason look like for a team that's found themselves in the midst of potential turmoil in the last couple weeks? We'll talk about that and much more coming up next here on GSMC's Down by Contact Sports Podcast.
For the best and latest podcasts available anywhere, go to the podcast app on your cell phone and type in GSMC to access free content-rich podcasts on health and wellness, book reviews, sports, entertainment, relationships, social media, movies, technology, finance, and even weird news. Subscribe and download the GSMC Podcast Network's family of shows, available everywhere podcasts are found. For the best and latest podcasts available anywhere, go to the podcast app on your cell phone and type in GSMC to access free content-rich podcasts on health and wellness, book reviews, sports, entertainment, relationships, social media, movies, technology, finance, and even weird news. Subscribe and download the GSMC Podcast Network's family of shows, available everywhere podcasts are found.
Welcome back to GSMC's Down by Contact Sports Podcast. I'm your host, Jeremy Lapidus. Today is Wednesday, February 26th. If you are just tuning in, we just went over the NBA Power Rankings. In this segment, we turn our attention to the NFL. What would a perfect offseason look like for the NFC West champions, the Los Angeles Rams? But before we do that, remember, if you would like to be an even bigger part of the show than you already are, all you need to do is go to gsmcpodcast.net. Or if you're on YouTube, you can use that super chat feature. If you do either of those two things, a message should pop up on the bottom of the screen for you, me, and everybody else around the world to see. If you do have a burning question about sports, anything at all that you would like to ask, go ahead and throw that in the comments. Throw it in the chat. I will get to it as soon as I possibly can. I appreciate everybody so much for sticking around, talking some sports with me here on a beautiful Wednesday, February 26th. But like I was saying, we are going to get into a little bit about what the dream offseason, what a perfect offseason might look like for the Los Angeles Rams. The Rams, of course, last season went 10-7. They won the NFC West, securing a spot in the playoffs, winning a game in the playoffs before losing in the divisional round to the Philadelphia Eagles. This is a really good Rams team, a Rams team that took the Eagles to the brink, came down to a fourth down by 8 after it seemed like the game was over in the snow. They're the team that pushed the Eagles the furthest to the brink the most, right? This was the team that played them the toughest, and now we look at where they stand, and it seems like this is a team that's imploding on itself. They're a team that has $40 million, around $40 million in cap space, good enough for 15th in the NFL. They're right in the middle there. They have the money to make some moves, but they have had a really interesting start to the offseason, right? They've said to start the offseason that they would be trading Cooper Kupp. Cooper Kupp, who did not seem interested in getting traded, the Rams came to him and said, hey, we're going to look at shopping you around. Cooper Kupp did not have his greatest season last year. He's come back as a true wide receiver 2 this season, especially after what happened with with Puka Nacua. Puka Nacua has come in and really stepped up, been that true number one for Matthew Stafford and the Rams. But Cooper Kupp still seemed happy with his number 2 role, but he's expensive for a number 2 receiver, and now they're looking at moving off of him. And then the big news came out. They let Matthew Stafford look for a trade. Matthew Stafford, who we talked about earlier this week, one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL right now, a top 10 quarterback, no doubt, in my opinion, top 8. But Matthew Stafford is sitting there, and he is looking at getting paid more money. He's a guy that won a Super Bowl with the Rams once since coming over from the Detroit Lions. He's a great quarterback. He's 37. The Rams don't really want to pay him that $50 million that he's asking for. And to go with all that, Jonah Jackson, one of their starting offensive linemen, has also been given permission to ask for a trade. Jonah Jackson not even on the free agent list right now, of which they have 16 free agents. They've got 16 unrestricted free agents, A lot of them are going to be very important and are starting pieces for them. You've got your top 2 left tackles in Joseph Noteboom and Ulrich Jackson. Depending on who you want to keep, you have to keep one of those 2. You have your number 3 and number 4 receivers, 3, 4, and 5 receivers in DeMarcus Robinson, Tutu Atwell, and Tyler Johnson, all of which have made pretty big plays throughout the season for the Rams. You also have a big piece of that defensive line that was so effective, especially in the playoffs, in Michael Hoyt, a linebacker in Christian Roseboom, and a corner who played nearly 50% of the snaps in Ahkello Witherspoon. But the other really interesting piece of it, with them seemingly moving off of Matthew Stafford, the second quarterback on the roster would have been Jimmy Garoppolo. But Jimmy Garoppolo also a pending free agent this season. The only rostered quarterback for them right now, as we speak, is Stetson Bennett. And that's not the way that you want to go. Now, this is a team that we talked about yesterday. Jimmy Garoppolo, I think, could fit into that tier of quarterback like we're seeing with a Brock Purdy, like we're seeing with a Jared Goff, right? That's the kind of tier quarterback that we've seen Jimmy Garoppolo be, and this is the kind of system that he would be successful in, of course. But Jimmy Garoppolo is a free agent, so they need to make this decision. Are you keeping Matthew Stafford? Because they said they'd be comfortable with rolling with Jimmy Garoppolo going into next season, which is questionable as it is. Jimmy Garoppolo, I think, has the ability to be a Jared Goff level quarterback, but he also has the ability to be a Daniel Jones level quarterback, and we've seen both, especially without an offensive line. Their biggest weakness this season, and 2 offensive linemen being free agents, one of them being being on the trade block. It's not a good time for you to turn your franchise, especially a franchise that's so close to being a Super Bowl level franchise, to a guy like Jimmy Garoppolo. I think he could work in this system because his ceiling is Jared Goff, and Jared Goff took this team to the Super Bowl, right? But also, we've seen his floor, and his floor is just too scary for them to really rely on. And so that leaves them, if they do decide to move off of Matthew Stafford, if they do decide we're not going to trade Matthew Stafford, who do they target in free agency? Do they go get a quarterback? Do they re-sign Jimmy Garoppolo? Do they go out and get Sam Darnold for his asking price? Sam Darnold, another guy who in that tier, like a Jimmy Garoppolo, I just don't really think fits with the offensive line in the state it is. Do they re-sign some of their receivers? Do they go out and get a tier 2 receiver like a Brandon Cooks, a return, or a Robert Woods return, or a Darius Slayton speedster, or a KJ Osborne that can come in and be a pretty good help for this team? Do they go address the cornerbacks in free agency, get a guy like Tre'Davious White, who's a little bit older, kind of lost a step, go and get a Rasul Douglas potentially, or do they spend all the money on the offensive line? Go and get Ronnie Stanley, who's a free agent from the Ravens. Go and spend money to go get a young Jedrick Wills to play the tackle positions. What do you do at this point? Because there are lots of ways to go for this team. I think the dream offseason, obviously, we're going to say it's impossible to keep Matt Stafford at this point. Although I do think they will keep Matt Stafford. If they're able to keep Matt Stafford, you hold on to him, and then you just go full in on the offensive line. You go full in on the offensive line. Get a Ronnie Stanley. Get a Jedrick Wills. Re-sign your favorite between Joseph Noteboom and Ulrich Jackson. Re-sign one of those two. Bring back Jimmy Garoppolo as a backup, just in case. But see what you can get for Matthew Stafford. In the event that you trade Matthew Stafford, it's a lot tougher. I think in that event, you go out and you get Aaron Rodgers. I know that's not a super popular opinion, but I think you might be able to get Rodgers pretty cheap right now. Not a veteran minimum contract, but I think if you're able to get Rodgers cheap, or maybe a guy like Russell Wilson could come in. But I think Rodgers can still revive his career here. If people are counting on Sam Darnold, if people are counting on Jimmy Garoppolo for this team, I don't see why you wouldn't be able to trust a 42-year-old Aaron Rodgers. I just really don't understand the difference between those two. At wide receiver, you do need to get someone else besides Puka. As good as Puka is, and he is arguably probably a top 5 receiver in the NFL right now, if you're getting rid of Cooper Kupp, which it sounds like they're planning on getting rid of him, you need to bring in someone else, whether that be through the draft or through the free agency. You need to get someone that can play opposite and still play that Rams style of football. So I'm looking at a guy that either has or has the ability to. KJ Osborne, I like a lot. Brandon Cooks, or a speedster in Darius Slayton. When it comes to the draft, they're picking at number 26. And we've talked about the offensive line. I think it's crucial that they address that position, especially if they're not able to get 2 really good ones in free agency. Go and get a guy like Armand Membu out of Missouri. If he's not available, Gray Zabel out of North Dakota State University is one of the better tackles. Obviously, his name isn't as big as it could be because he went to an FCS school, but an FCS school that is known for running the rock and just being hard-nosed football. If you're going to trade, if neither of those guys are available, and if you go and address that offensive line issue in free agency, go out and get a cornerback. Go and target one of the top 3 corners. Maybe a Trey Amos out of Ole Miss. Maybe you get a Benjamin Morrison out of Notre Dame, although he's starting to slip on some draft boards, so that's something to look out for. This is a team that could go in a lot of different directions. I think overall, what their general plan should be, keep this team together. I don't like trading Cooper Kupp and Matthew Stafford. Keep them together for one more year. But if you have to trade one of them, if you have to trade both of them, bring an offensive line in as soon as possible and bring back Jimmy Garoppolo or bring in Aaron Rodgers. I think that's the move for them. But I'd love to hear your thoughts. What do you think the Rams should do? What is their perfect offseason? I'd love to hear it. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we go over what an MLB season might look like for the reigning champions of the NL Central. The Milwaukee Brewers won their division, bounced in the wild card yet again. Can they improve? What did their offseason do for their chances? We're going to talk about that and much more coming up next. You're on GSMC's Down by Contact Sports Podcast. Welcome back to GSMC's Down by Contact Sports Podcast. I am your host, Jeremy Lapidus. Today is Wednesday, February 26th, if you are just tuning in. We just finished going over what a perfect offseason might look like for the Los Angeles Rams. In this segment, we continue our romp around the MLB, this time stopping in the NL Central, going over what a season might look like for the Milwaukee Brewers. But before we do that, remember, if you would like to be an even bigger part of the show than you already are, all you need to do is go to gsmcpodcast.net. Or if you're on YouTube, you can use that super chat feature. If you do either of those two things, a message should pop up on the bottom of the screen for you, me, and everybody else around the world to see. If you do have a burning question about sports, anything at all that you would like to ask, go ahead and throw that in the comments. Throw it in the chat. I will get to it as soon as I possibly can. I appreciate everybody so much for sticking around, talking some sports with me here on a beautiful Wednesday, February 26th. But like I was saying, we are going to get into our fifth topic here of the day, that being the Milwaukee Brewers, what a season might look like for them. Last season, they won 93 games. They were near the top of the MLB, first in the NL Central. They ended up losing in the wild card round yet again, this time to the Mets, who made it all the way to the NLCS. Losing 2-1 in a game that looked like they were going to be able to take care of it. They end up losing on a near walk-off home run from Pete Alonso, and they don't really do much this offseason. They bring in a bunch of small-name guys, a bunch of minor league deals, a bunch of guys that aren't going to be super impactful for this team, bringing in Mark Canha, a first baseman and outfielder, a guy that's really more of a utility person, has played in his career all around the infield, all around the outfield, to a minor league deal. They brought in Grant Wolfram for the bullpen, as well as Elvin Rodriguez and Tyler Alexander for the bullpen or starting pitching duties. They both have the ability to do that, but most likely for the bullpen. They made a big trade too, and that was the big centerpiece of their offseason. They've now, in back-to-back seasons, moved off of closers. They traded away one of the best closers in the game in Devin Williams, sent him over to the Yankees in exchange for starting pitcher Nestor Cortez, as well as a utility guy, a second baseman, kind of a Jose Altuve kind of build in Caleb Durbin. A shorter guy, but can play all around the field, has got a solid bat. Caleb Durbin is expected to play a pretty big role for the team this year as a guy that hasn't made his major league debut yet, but with the defense as it is, I expect him to get some games in, get some minutes, get some starts. Caleb Durbin, a huge piece of that trade. It's not a great looking trade. Nestor Cortez, not really a top tier starter, and Caleb Durbin, while he's good, he isn't really the kind of guy that I look at him like, wow, he's going to be a difference maker. They didn't lose too many key pieces. They lost a bunch of starters. Joe Ross, a guy that me personally, I'm a big fan of, but not really anything special when it comes to the MLB. Frankie Montas, as well as Wade Miley. They lost some relief pitchers in Hobie Milner and Colin Ray, as well as catcher Gary Sanchez, and the big one, shortstop Willy Adames, one of the best shortstops in the game. It leaves them really shorthanded on the left side of the infield at third base and shortstop, and that's where they're going to have their big question. The position battles that they'll have in training camp in the spring training so far is going to be mostly centered around shortstop and third base. You have your incumbent second baseman in Bryce Terang potentially moving over to shortstop with the guy that they expect to be the shortstop in Joey Ortiz. If Ortiz doesn't win that job, does he move over to third base? And if you do that, do you put Joey Ortiz at third base, Bryce Terang at short, and Caleb Durbin at second? Do you find a way to put Caleb Durbin at third? The favorite right now is probably going to be either Tyler Black, a pretty good prospect, or Oliver Dunn, but they don't really have a true veteran that can come in and play third base. Like I said, Mark Canha has played third base in the past, but it's only been 3 or 4 games scattered throughout his career. It's not a big enough sample size to sit at and say, he's going to be our third baseman. So it puts you in a tough spot. I think at the end of the day, they're probably going to run with Joey Ortiz at shortstop, or Joey Ortiz at third, Bryce Terang at shortstop, and Caleb Durbin at second base, but that could change. Fangraphs has it projected a whole nother way, but we'll get to that in a second. This is a really interesting team because this is a team that has been really solid. They always seem to make these moves. They always seem to make these surprise moves, and they seem to be fine. They've always been built around pitching. The batting hasn't always been there, but last season the bats were there a little bit. The pitching kind of took a bit of a step back until the playoffs when they kind of reverted back to normal Brewers mode where they couldn't hit and the pitching did just barely not enough, right? Eventually, you just had one part of it win out. But the projected lineup from Fangraphs has the rookie from last year in right field, Jackson Chourio, leading off, DHing Christian Yelich, hitting second, William Contreras, one of the best catchers in the game, hitting third. Garrett Mitchell at center field, hitting fourth. An older Rhys Hoskins, first base at fifth. Your second baseman, who I think is probably going to end up being Caleb Durbin, but they say is going to be Bryce Terang. Third base, they project Oliver Dunn. Again, I think Joey Ortiz is going to take third base. Maybe Tyler Black takes that position, and then Joey Ortiz at shortstop, or, like I said, maybe Bryce Terang. There's a lot to figure out here, especially in the middle and back end of that infield. It's just a really tough spot to be in. The rotation, as well as hitting ninth, Sal Frelick in left field. But the rotation isn't as stacked as it usually is. You have Brandon Woodruff, who's supposed to come back from injury pretty soon. He missed all of last season, though, so that's not a good look. Freddie Peralta is projected to be the day one starter. Then Tobias Myers, Nestor Cortez, who they were able to get in that trade from the Yankees, Aaron Savali, and Aaron Ashby. This is not the Brewers' stacked rotation that we're used to seeing, and it's the same thing with the bullpen. When you look at this Brewers bullpen, Trevor McGill is the projected closer, with Jared Koenig and Joel Payamps as the setup guys. You've got some names in this bullpen: Brian Hudson, Nick Mears, Elvis Peguero, and Tyler Anderson as your mid-relievers, and Connor Thomas, your Rule 5 draft guy, in the long reliever slot. But this is a team that I think took a pretty big step back last season, at least in the offseason. This is a team that I don't think is going to find a way to win their division, although I've always been lower on the Brewers than they end up being. So the Brewers are a team that I seem to constantly underestimate, but that's not going to stop me this season. Vegas has their line set at 82.5 games. 82.5 games for this team that just doesn't seem to have the juice. It doesn't seem to have the guys coming off the bench or the defense to really help them. The order isn't going to be great outside of the top 3 or 4. This is a team that I just think is kind of getting old, a team that I think is holding on to something. They had a real chance a couple years ago. They just were never able to pair the batting with the pitching at the same time, and it sucks because this is a team that could have been a that was a World Series level team for a very long time. But as it stands right now, I think they're more of a 500 team. I think they'll finish with 81 wins, 81-81 in a 162 game season. I just don't really see them getting it done. I think the Brewers are a team that missed a real big opportunity to get anything done in the playoffs, and it sucks. They're out of their era, and I think it's time for them to move on. But let me know what your thoughts are. I'd love to hear them. What do you think the Brewers are going to be able to get done this season? And thank you, everybody, so much for tuning in to today's episode of GSMC's Down by Contact Sports Podcast. The NFL Combine starts tomorrow. We'll go over all that when we go live on our show, as well as anything else going on from around the world of sports. I have been your host, Jeremy Lapidus. I will see you then. Bye-bye.
Let's go. I wake up to a little bit of drool on my pillow, feel like it's gonna be a bad day. Yeah, I'm tired of shit, and the coffee ain't hit yet, damn, ain't that great. I don't wanna